The Fox News studio felt different that Tuesday night. There was an electricity in the air that even the seasoned crew members couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was the unusual guest lineup. Maybe it was the way Greg Gutfeld had been smirking during the pre-show prep, that knowing look in his eyes that suggested he had something planned. Or maybe it was just the sheer audacity of what was about to happen. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, sitting down with Greg Gutfeld on his late-night show. The booking alone had sent shockwaves through the media world. What was she thinking? What was he planning? Everyone knew Greg didn't pull punches. Everyone knew Meghan was protective of her image. This was either going to be brilliantly civil or spectacularly combustible. The show opened with Greg's usual monologue, sharp and biting as always. He riffed on politics, made jokes about celebrities, threw in his signature one-liners that had his panel laughing and the audience eating out of his hand. But there was something extra in his delivery tonight, an edge of sharpness that felt pointed, deliberate. When he mentioned that Meghan Markle would be joining them, the audience reaction was mixed. Some cheered. Others groaned. A few laughed nervously. Greg grinned at that divided response and said, "Oh, I know. Trust me, I know. But hey, she wanted to come on. She said she wanted to have real conversations with people who disagree with her. So here we are. Let's see how real she wants it to get." The panel laughed, but there was tension in it. Kat Timpf shifted in her seat. Tyrus raised his eyebrows. Even the normally unflappable regulars seemed aware that tonight might go somewhere unexpected. The commercial break felt longer than usual. Backstage, Meghan was in the green room with her small team. She looked composed, immaculate in a cream-colored blazer and perfectly styled hair. But if you looked closely, you could see her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the slight tension in her jaw. Her publicist was giving her last-minute advice. "Remember, stay calm, don't let him bait you. Keep it about the message, about the work." Meghan nodded, but her eyes were distant. She'd been preparing for this differently than her team realized. She wasn't here to smile and deflect. She was tired of that. Tired of playing nice while people tore her apart. She'd agreed to come on Gutfeld specifically because she wanted to face her critics head-on. But now, sitting in that green room, hearing the muffled laughter from the studio audience, she wondered if this was a mistake. If she was walking into an ambush dressed up as an interview. When the show came back from commercial, Greg introduced her with his characteristic style. "Alright folks, our next guest is someone you either love or, let's be honest, probably don't. She's an actress, a duchess, a podcast host, and depending on who you ask, either a champion of social justice or a professional victim. Please welcome Meghan Markle." The audience's response was telling. Scattered applause. A few cheers, some stony silence. Meghan walked onto the set with her head held high, that practiced smile on her face, the one that didn't quite reach her eyes. She shook Greg's hand, settled into the guest chair, and for a moment they just looked at each other. The panel members watched like spectators at a tennis match, waiting to see who would serve first. Greg leaned back in his chair, that familiar smirk playing at his lips. "Meghan, thanks for coming. I have to say, I was surprised when your team reached out. You're not exactly known for sitting down with people who've been critical of you." Meghan's smile tightened slightly, but her voice remained smooth. "Well, Greg, I think it's important to have conversations across divides. I wanted to show that I'm willing to engage with different perspectives, even when they're not always fair or accurate." There it was, the first jab. Subtle, but everyone caught it. Greg's eyebrows went up. "Not fair or accurate. That's interesting. Because from where I sit, a lot of the criticism you've received has been pretty spot on. You and Harry left the royal family claiming you wanted privacy, and then you did what, like 5 major interviews, a Netflix series. Look, that's not wanting privacy. That's wanting control of the narrative." The audience reacted immediately. Some applauded. Others shifted uncomfortably. Meghan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. There's a difference between privacy and wanting to correct lies. The tabloid media in Britain absolutely destroyed me. They made up stories, twisted my words, attacked me for things that were completely fabricated. We didn't want to hide. We just wanted to be able to tell our truth without it being filtered through people who had a vested interest in making me look bad. Greg shook his head, leaning forward. "See, but here's the thing, Meghan. You keep saying or truth like truth is subjective. Truth is truth. Facts are facts. And the fact is, you've made a career out of being a victim. The royal family was mean to you. The press was mean to you. Even your own family apparently was mean to you. At some point, don't you look around and think, maybe I'm the common denominator here?" The studio went silent. You could hear people inhaling sharply. Tyrus and Kat exchanged glances. The camera operators leaned in instinctively, capturing Meghan's face as she processed what had just been said. Her smile was completely gone now, her jaw was set. When she spoke, her voice was quieter but loaded with barely contained emotion. "That's incredibly dismissive, Greg. And honestly, it's exactly the kind of attitude that drives people to despair. When someone speaks up about abuse, about racism, about institutional gaslighting, and the response is to say, well, maybe you're the problem, that's how you silence people. That's how you make them feel like their pain doesn't matter." Greg wasn't backing down. "Abuse? Racism? Meghan, you lived in a palace, you had staff, you had security, you married into one of the most famous families in the world. Forgive me if I'm not seeing the victimhood here. You know who experiences real racism? People who can't get jobs because of the color of their skin. People who get pulled over by cops for no reason. People who don't have the luxury of flying private to complain about it on Oprah." The audience was getting louder now. Some were clapping, others were booing. The panel looked genuinely uncomfortable. This wasn't the usual comedic back and forth. This was personal. This was real. Meghan's hands gripped the armrests of her chair. Her voice rose slightly. How dare you minimize what I went through? You have no idea what it was like. The constant scrutiny, the lies, being compared to my sister-in-law constantly, being called difficult, demanding, a diva when I was just trying to do my job. And yes, there were racist undertones in a lot of it. Comments about my son's skin color before he was even born. That's not something I made up. That happened. Greg tilted his head. Comments about your son's skin color. You said that on Oprah, caused a huge international incident, and then wouldn't name who said it. That's not being brave, Meghan. That's throwing a grenade and walking away. If it was so serious, if it was so damaging, why not say who said it? Why leave everyone speculating? Because right now, it just looks like you wanted to damage the royal family without being held accountable for the accusation. Meghan's face flushed. We didn't name them because it would have been incredibly destructive. And honestly, it wasn't just one person. It was the whole environment, the whole institution that treated me like an outsider from day one. Greg laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. An outsider? You married the prince? You became a duchess? What more did they have to do? Give you the crown? Look, I get it. I'm sure it wasn't easy. I'm sure there were challenges. But you act like you're some kind of revolutionary for leaving an institution that made you famous worldwide and then profiting off every detail of why you left. That's not courage. That's a business model. The words hung in the air like smoke. Meghan stared at him, her breathing visible now, her composure cracking. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or gasp. The producers in the control room were having a silent crisis. This was beyond heated. This was a demolition. Meghan's voice shook when she spoke next. A business model. Is that what you think my pain is? Is that what you think my mental health struggles are? I told the world I was suicidal. I told them I went to the institution and begged for help and was denied. And you're sitting here calling it a business model. Greg's expression hardened. I think you weaponized your mental health issues to win a PR battle. And before you jump down my throat, I'm not saying you didn't struggle. I'm saying the way you've used those struggles publicly, strategically, in interviews and documentaries feels calculated. If you really wanted help, if you really wanted privacy, you wouldn't have made your trauma the centerpiece of a multi-million-dollar media empire. That was the breaking point. Meghan stood up abruptly, her hands trembling. The entire studio gasped. Greg straightened in his chair, surprised but trying not to show it. The panel froze. The cameras zoomed in instinctively. You don't get to tell me how to process my trauma, Meghan said, her voice shaking with fury. You don't get to tell me what's calculated and what's real. You've never walked a day in my shoes. You've never had your entire existence picked apart by millions of people. You've never had to smile through the worst pain of your life because showing emotion would be called dramatic or manipulative. Greg stood up too, his voice rising to match hers. And you've never had to work a real job in your life. You were an actress on a cable show, married a prince, and now you're a professional complainer. You want sympathy. Try talking to people who actually have problems. People who can't pay their bills. People who don't have mansions in California and lucrative Netflix deals. You're not a victim, Meghan. You're just someone who couldn't handle not being the most important person in the room. The studio erupted. The audience was on their feet now, some shouting in support of Greg, others yelling in defense of Meghan. The panel didn't know where to look. Tyrus stood up as if to intervene. Kat covered her mouth in shock. The producers were screaming into their headsets, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this play out. Meghan's eyes were brimming with tears now, but her voice was steel. You know what the saddest part is? I came here in good faith. I came here to try to bridge a divide, and you've just proven exactly what I've been saying all along. People like you don't want conversation, you want domination, you want to tear people down to build yourselves up, and you do it with a smile and a joke so you can pretend it's all in good fun. But it's not. It's cruelty. Greg's face was red now too, his composure slipping. Good faith. You came here to lecture us. To play the victim one more time on national television. You wanted a platform and I gave you one. I just didn't give you a free pass. And you can't handle that. You can't handle being challenged. That's your problem, Meghan. Not the media. Not the royal family. Not me. You. The silence that followed was deafening. Meghan grabbed her microphone and pulled it off, the wire tangling for a moment before she freed herself. She looked directly at Greg, tears streaming down her face now, but her voice was clear. I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because you've built your entire career on making other people feel small. And one day, you're going to realize how empty that is. She turned and walked off the set. No hesitation, no looking back. The audience was in complete chaos. Some were standing, applauding her exit. Others were booing. Some were just stunned into silence. Greg stood at his desk, watching her go, his chest heaving. For a moment, he looked like he might call after her, might say something else. But he didn't. He just stood there. The producers finally cut to commercial. The studio lights dimmed slightly. Greg sat back down heavily in his chair. The panel was silent, everyone processing what had just happened. Tyrus leaned over. Men, that was. Greg held up a hand. I know. Backstage was absolute pandemonium. Meghan's team rushed to her as she came through the door, tears still flowing, her hands shaking. Her publicist was immediately on damage control mode, phone pressed to her ear, already crafting responses. Someone brought her water. Someone else brought tissues. But Meghan just stood there, shaking. The adrenaline of the confrontation still coursing through her. I shouldn't have stood up, she whispered. I shouldn't have let him see me cry. Her publicist stopped mid-sentence on the phone. Meghan, you stood up for yourself. You showed emotion. That's human. That's real. Real doesn't matter. Meghan said bitterly. Only the clip matters, only the headline matters, and tomorrow everyone's gonna say I had a meltdown on Gutfeld. They're gonna say he won, and she was right. Within minutes, the clips were being uploaded. Social media exploded. Twitter was a war zone. Instagram was flooded with takes. TikTok was already making memes. The phrases, Gutfeld destroys Meghan, and Meghan Markle meltdown, were trending within the hour. News outlets scrambled to cover it. Opinion pieces were being written in real time. The show continued after the commercial break, but the energy was completely different. Greg tried to joke about it, tried to move on to other topics, but everyone could tell he was rattled. His usual sharp wit felt forced. The panel was subdued, going through the motions. The audience was still buzzing, talking among themselves, only half listening to the rest of the show. When they finally wrapped, Greg sat alone in his dressing room, tie loosened, staring at his find. The reactions were rolling in. His supporters were calling him a hero, saying he'd finally told Meghan Markle what everyone was thinking. His critics were calling him a bully, saying he'd ambushed a woman discussing her mental health struggles. He scrawled through it all, his expression unreadable. His producer knocked and entered. Greg didn't look up.
Yeah.
You okay? Greg finally looked up, his face harder to read than usual. Did I go too far? The producer hesitated. I don't know, man. You said what you believe, she said what she believes, it got real. Too real, Greg muttered. He rubbed his face with his hands. I didn't mean to make her cry. Didn't you, though? The producer asked quietly. Greg didn't answer. He just went back to staring at his phone, watching the clips spread, watching the world pick sides, watching what should have been a conversation turn into ammunition for a culture war neither of them could control anymore. At home that night, Meghan sat in her living room with Harry. He'd watched the whole thing live, had been trying to call her the second it ended. Now he sat beside her holding her hand, his face a mixture of anger and concern. He's a bully, Harry said firmly. He ambushed you. Everyone can see that. But Meghan shook her head. It doesn't matter what everyone can see, it matters what they choose to see, and half of them will see me as weak, overly emotional. Proving everything he said about me being a victim. You're not weak, Harry insisted. You stood up for yourself, you told your truth, Meghan repeated softly. Had a point about that, didn't he? Truth isn't supposed to be subjective. Harry squeezed her hand. He twisted everything you said. He made it about money and fame when it was about survival, about mental health. He was never going to give you a fair chance. Meghan leaned back, closing her eyes. Maybe I was never going to give him a fair chance either. Maybe I went on there looking for a fight because I'm so tired of staying silent. Maybe we're both guilty of exactly what we accused each other of. That night, social media didn't sleep. The debate raged on every platform. Think pieces appeared by the dozen. Greg Gutfeld crosses the line. Read one headline. Meghan Markle can't handle criticism. Read another. The confrontation that revealed everything wrong with our culture opened a third. Everyone had a take. Everyone had chosen a side. And in the middle of it all were two people who'd gone into a conversation and come out having revealed more of themselves than they'd intended. Days passed. The controversy didn't die down the way these things usually did. It lingered. Other celebrities started weighing in. Some defended Meghan, saying Greg had been unnecessarily cruel. Others defended Greg, saying someone needed to hold Meghan accountable for her contradictions. The royal family stayed silent, which only fueled more speculation. Oprah posted a cryptic message about compassion. Ellen posted about kindness. The internet analyzed every word. Greg addressed it briefly on his next show. Look, things got heated the other night. That happens when you have real conversations with real stakes. I stand by what I said. I think Meghan has played the victim card to build a brand, and I think that's worth calling out. But do I wish she'd stayed? Yeah. Do I wish we could have found some common ground? Maybe. But sometimes, conversations are messy, and if we can't handle messy conversations, we're never going to get anywhere. His audience applauded, but even that felt hollow somehow. Meghan didn't address it publicly at all. Her team released a statement. The conversation on Gutfeld demonstrated the very challenges we face when discussing mental health, institutional racism, and the treatment of women in the public eye. While we believe in open dialogue, we also believe dialogue should be conducted with basic respect and humanity. Behind the scenes, though, Meghan was struggling. She'd been through media storms before, had weathered countless controversies and attacks. But something about this one felt different. Maybe it was seeing herself break down on camera. Maybe it was the way the clip had been edited and re-edited, turned into content for every possible narrative. Maybe it was just exhaustion. The exhaustion of always having to defend yourself, explain yourself, prove yourself. She talked to her therapist about it. Talked about how Greg's words had hit harder than she wanted to admit. Not because he was entirely wrong, but because he was partially right. She had monetized her story. She had built a platform on her struggles. Was that wrong? Was it cynical? Or was it just survival? Taking control of a narrative that would exist whether she participated or not. Does it matter what my intentions were if the outcome looks the same? She asked her therapist. If I'm profiting from talking about my pain, does it make the pain less real? Her therapist sat quietly for a moment before responding. Do you think your pain is less real? No, Meghan said immediately. Then quieter. But I understand why people think it is. Meanwhile, Greg was having his own reckoning, not publicly. Never publicly. But in private moments, when the cameras were off and the audience was gone, he thought about that night more than he wanted to admit. He remembered the look on Meghan's face when she stood up, the tears, the tremor in her voice. He'd wanted to challenge her, to push back against what he saw as hypocrisy. But had he wanted to hurt her, He told himself no, but late at night, staring at the ceiling, he wasn't so sure. His wife asked him about it. Do you regret it? Greg was quiet for a long time. I regret how it played out. I don't regret what I said. Does that make sense? Not really, she said honestly. He sighed. I think she's wrong about a lot of things. I think her narrative is self-serving. But I also think she probably did suffer. Those things can both be true, and maybe I could have made my point without making her cry. So what do you do now? Nothing, Greg said. I move on. That's what we do in this business. We move on? But moving on felt harder this time, because the confrontation had revealed something uncomfortable, not just about Meghan or Greg, but about all of us. About how we consume pain as entertainment. About how we demand vulnerability from public figures and then punish them for it. About how we've turned complex human beings into characters in our own personal narratives. Heroes and villains in a story we're all writing together without anyone's permission. Weeks later, at a charity event completely unrelated to anything, someone asked Meghan about the Gutfeld appearance. She smiled, that practiced smile that still didn't reach her eyes. It was a learning experience, she said diplomatically. I learned that some conversations aren't worth having. And I learned that my peace is more important than trying to change minds that don't want to be changed. But later, alone in her car, she let the smile drop. She thought about Greg's words, about being the common denominator, about weaponizing her pain, and she wondered if there was truth in them. Not the whole truth, never the whole truth, but enough truth to sting. Enough truth to make her question herself in ways she didn't want to admit. Greg never spoke about it again after that initial follow-up, but people who knew him said he'd changed slightly. A little less vicious in his commentary about Meghan specifically. Not soft, never soft, but there was an edge that had been filed down just slightly. A moment of hesitation before going for the jugular. Maybe he'd learned something too. Or maybe he just didn't want to see that look on someone's face again. The look of someone breaking in real time in front of millions. The truth is, there was no resolution. No apology. No reconciliation. No moment of understanding where both sides came together and realized they'd been talking past each other all along. This isn't a movie. Real life doesn't have those moments. Real life just has aftermath. Consequences. The slow burn of regret mixed with self-justification. The way both of them would see that clip occasionally, months or years later, and feel something complicated. Not quite regret, not quite pride, something in between, something human. The footage lives on, of course. It always does. Preserved forever in the infinite archives of the internet. Students will study it someday probably. Communications majors will analyze the body language, the word choice, the escalation. Psychologists will write papers about it. Cultural critics will use it as evidence of whatever point they're trying to make about society, media, gender, race, privilege, accountability. But none of them will know what Greg felt sitting alone in his dressing room that night, scrolling through reactions, wondering if he'd crossed a line. None of them will know what Meghan felt sitting in her car, tears finally dry, realizing she'd given the world exactly what they wanted: her pain, packaged and delivered on live television. None of them will know the private doubts, the second guessing, the complicated emotions that didn't fit neatly into a 30-second clip or a trending hashtag. That's the thing about viral moments. They're viral because they're dramatic, because they're clear, because there are sides to pick and winners to declare. But the reality is always more complicated, always messier, always more human than we want to admit. Greg and Meghan both learned that night that you can be right about someone and wrong to them at the same time. That words can be true and cruel simultaneously. That sometimes being honest means being harsh, but being harsh doesn't always mean being helpful. The audience got their moment, the producers got their ratings, the internet got their content. But what did Greg and Meghan get? A viral clip that would follow them forever. A moment of conflict that would define them in ways neither could fully control. The burden of knowing they'd revealed parts of themselves they couldn't take back. And the quiet, uncomfortable knowledge that they'd both played their parts in a spectacle that hurt them, both even if one seemed to walk away victorious. In the end, the real tragedy wasn't the argument itself. It was that it had to happen at all. That we've created a media landscape where the only way to have a conversation is to have a confrontation. Where nuance dies in the pursuit of clicks, where two people can't disagree without it becoming a gladiatorial contest for public approval, where someone has to win and someone has to lose, even when they're both just human beings trying to navigate impossible situations under impossible scrutiny. The lights in that studio went dark eventually. The crew went home. The audience dispersed. But the moment lived on, floating in the digital ether, viewed and reviewed, analyzed and judged, reduced to its most inflammatory components. And somewhere in that reduction, the humanity of it all got lost. The pain, the doubt, the complicated truth that maybe nobody was entirely right or entirely wrong. Maybe they were just two people having a terrible conversation that should have stayed private but instead became public spectacle. That's the cost of our modern moment. We get the drama. We get the entertainment. We get the satisfaction of picking sides and feeling righteous. But we lose the ability to see people as people. Complex, flawed, hurting people who sometimes say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, break at the wrong moment. We lose empathy in the pursuit of content. And we all move on to the next controversy, the next viral moment, the next confrontation, never quite learning the lesson that keeps presenting itself. Greg Gutfeld and Meghan Markle will probably never speak again. They'll exist in their separate worlds, occasionally reminded of that night by a random clip or anniversary think piece. They'll both have their own version of what happened, what it meant, who was right. And neither version will be complete, because the complete version would require them to see each other as fully human. And that's the one thing our culture doesn't reward anymore.